Thank you, Corey. Well, hello, my name is Seth, if we haven't met, and I'm one of the tall guys that was featured in Andy's picture. It's good to see you today. When I was in high school, I was actually involved in Young Life, and I was invited by our leader to go to one of their summer camps in Rockbridge, Virginia. And on the way, before we were going to arrive at camp, we were going to make a pit stop in West Virginia to go on a whitewater rafting journey, adventure. And I went to camp with my friend Jordan, and so we both have never been whitewater rafting before, so we were super pumped to experience this new journey. And so anyways, we took a bus and we arrived to our destination at the Upper Gauley River in West Virginia, and we exited the bus and we were standing there with a group of other students and the instructor who was telling us what we were going to experience on our journey. And I remember we were standing at the bank of the river, and right here at the bank of the river, I was looking at the river and I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Like, it looked like, if you've ever been to Soak City, it was so calm and smooth. It was like a lazy river at Soak City. And so I turned to my friend Jordan and I say, hey, dude, are you paying attention to what he's saying? And my friend Jordan turns to me and he said, no. And so he finally finished. We put our life jackets on, we put our helmets on, and we ended up jumping into a raft with 6 other students that we didn't know and an instructor. And so we're heading down the river, and it was just like I said. It was smooth, it was calm. It was like a beautiful Hollywood scene in a movie. Like, it was beautiful out. We were dipping our feet in the water, splashing each other with paddles. Like, it was just awesome. The current started to pick up a little bit, and I remember thinking, okay, this is getting fun. And then about 50 yards in front of us, I'm telling you, it came out of nowhere. It was like the gates of hell broke loose in a second. We were entering into class 5 and 6 rapids. And I'm telling you what, we went from this tight-knit group all together, having fun, enjoying the scenery, and this is what it ended up looking like. Yeah. Yes. Just like that. I mean, not even 5 seconds into the rapids, we flipped over. We were spread out in the water like cockroaches. People were bouncing off rocks like ping pong balls. I remember paddles were coming down the river. There was life jackets and helmets coming down the river. There may not have been a diaper that floated down the river, which might have been mine at the moment because I was afraid, to be honest with you. And I remember somehow I was by the raft and I could pick myself up, and I was on top of the raft, and I was the only one up there. And if you've ever seen Titanic, it was like this Jack and Rose moment where Rose is on top of the raft and it's life or death. And my friend Jordan came up out of nowhere and he's crying. He's like, dude, please help me, get me up on the raft. And I did what a logical person would do in that situation. I kicked him in the face just like that. He fell off. Okay, maybe I didn't kick him in the face, but I do remember thinking to myself, how in the heck did we end up here? And the truth is, we don't have to be on a river to feel that way in our relationships. Maybe you have been there. A conversation starts where you're on a lazy river, it's smooth sailing, and things are going well in your relationships, but next thing you know, before you even know it, you're thinking to yourself, how in the heck did we end up here? We experience this conflict or this tension or this rapids. And you know, it only takes one wrong look, one wrong word, one misread text message to put our relationships on the rocks. And once that conflict starts, the rapids can pick up quickly. And I think when it comes to those moments in our relationships, we respond naturally in these 4 ways I put it. We can respond with sarcasm. We naturally like to respond with brutal honesty. Now, that is where it is an honest response, but it's those things that fester, and then when conflict arises, everything bubbles up to the surface. Social media we like to use, and then also another way, our 4th way, is exclusion. And it's not that we know that these are great ideas or great responses to use, but we love to justify our excuses and make excuses and justify our behaviors by saying, well, you just don't understand. She just made me really mad. Or, hey, somebody had to tell him the truth. Somebody had to be honest with him. And it's not that we're bad people, but these behaviors we see all over the place. And we pick them up from the sports channels we watch, from reality TV, the magazines we read, the radio. It could even be the relationships at work or at school or at home. And so it's only natural for us to pick up these behaviors. And not only does it not fix any part of the situation, it makes and creates a cycle of dysfunction and can also create a cycle of hurt and pain, stress and anxiety in our relationships. And maybe you have been somebody, a victim of that, where somebody said something to you or acted a certain way to you that just, man, it cut deeper. Maybe it was in high school. You still remember what somebody said to you. Maybe it was maybe it was this week at work. Maybe it was on your way to church this morning where somebody said something to you and there's conflict in our relationships because of a conversation that went from smooth sailing to hitting some current pretty fast. But is there an alternative? Is there anything that we can do when it comes to the conflict, to those situations in our life and in our relationships? And believe it or not, but the Bible actually has a lot to say about conflict and how to handle that in our relationships. And King Solomon wrote this proverb, and wherever you're at, with church, Bible, or Jesus, whatever your belief is, I think what we're going to unpack here today is going to be helpful for all of us in our relationships. And Proverbs is a book that is full of simple ideas and phrases to help us in a practical sense take our relationships from a monotonous viewpoint to adventurous. And we're going to be looking at 15:1. So if you want to follow along, here's what Solomon addresses this whole conflict in our relationships. He says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stirs up anger." Now, I want to look at that first half. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Now, maybe you don't use the word wrath every single day, but in this context, that word it means anger, it means fighting, it means reaching a boiling point. And Solomon is telling us that we have an option when it comes to the conflict in our relationships. Just like the rapids in a river, we don't have to paddle straight through them or straight for them. If we're paying attention, we can, for the most part, steer around them and avoid that stress or that conflict like in a river. And in relationships, I believe we have the same opportunity. When we see a conversation rising up or, it gets tense or there's conflict, we can either steer around them with a gentle response or we can stir up, which leads us to our next place, because Solomon doesn't just leave us there. He goes on to say this, how to steer away from the rapids. He says, "But a harsh word stirs up anger." And when it comes to those sticky situations in our relationships and our friendships, Solomon says that the way to steer around those conflicted moments is with a gentle answer, but a harsh word, a harsh response will stir up. Now, we've been talking about the river for a little while, and so what causes, if we think about that, what causes the rapids in a river? It's something that's under the surface, and in this case, the rocks usually. And the water then gets stirred up, and Solomon is telling us that our words have the same power to do so. We can either use our words and our response as a gentle response to help steer around rapids, or we can respond with harshness, which will then stir up more conflict, more stress in our relationships. In other words, if there's one thing that I want you to know from this, to take away, is a gentle response often begins with gentleness. Maybe you've experienced this. Maybe you were being harsh to somebody, or you were saying some sarcastic comments to get the relationship stirred up a little bit. And instead, the person you were having a conversation with, they responded with a gentle response. Maybe they turned away, not from you, but from the situation. Or maybe it was with your kids on the way here to church. Maybe it's with a boss where somebody responded to you with a gentle response. What happened with your relationship? Did it help? Did it make it a little bit better? Did you avoid stress, anxiety? Did you avoid, my grandpa he used to like to say, the doghouse? And believe it or not, but I believe, there's going to be times in our life where we're going to get ignored or people will attack us or they're going to say things to us, and it's going to be hard to discern how to actually really respond in those situations. And like we said, but that doesn't mean that we have to go with the flow. We don't have to contribute with the conflict when it does arise. Just like we talked about with our behaviors and justifying our behaviors, I believe that we make those justifications because we believe that we have control. But that's not true because we don't have to participate in the madness. Some practical next steps of how we can live this out, of what you do have control of with your response. I put them in 3 ways. You have the response or the power to refuse to participate in the conflict. You can decide these 3 things here today. Next, You can refuse to use demeaning body language. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe it's an arms crossed, arms folded. Maybe it's an eye roll. Maybe it's a hair flip. I don't know. Whatever that is for you. We all have our ways of using demeaning body language. And number 3, you have the power to refuse to lose control of your tone. Now, I know it's much more easier said than done, but I believe in you. I think you can do this. And as I wrap up here today, there are going to be people in our lives that will never do this, but we don't have to be like that. If we want non-stressed, non-anxious relationships to where we aren't experiencing conflict, to where our relationships can get stirred up like the rapids, I think that this is a game changer with a gentle response, because it's a game changer for our marriages, for our dating relationships, our schools, our teachers, our relationships with our boss, our kids. And this is something that we can decide today to live it out. So remember, a gentle response often begins with gentleness. Thanks.